This is Do It For a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
I've been doing electronics as a hobby since I was about 10, and I've been programming computers since I was about 8. So I had a bit of an idea of what I was getting into.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It For a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now. Everybody, I'm really excited and I'm in a good mood today. So I've got Andy Wyatt all the way from Australia.
Hi.
Andy Wyatt is the founder of Adaptronic, and he's the smartest guy in the room right now, right, Andy?
I'm so worried that I'll be discovered and everyone will realize I'm not as smart as people say I am. That's one of my biggest fears.
So, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Adaptronic.
Right, okay. Well, you mean like in terms of my background and how I got into it, or...?
Yeah, tell us about yourself and your business. You know, okay. How did you get started?
Yeah, well, I guess I've always liked electronics and computers and cars since I was a teenager, probably before then, actually. I actually started studying mechatronic engineering because I suddenly had this revelation that for a career I wanted to do electronics on cars. And so about in... So towards the end of first year uni, I bought my first fuel-injected turbocharged car to get over a girl, which didn't really work all that well, but that's not a story. I bought the car at night time, and I'm never buying a car at night time again because it drove okay, but you know I'd never driven a turbo car before, and I didn't really know what it was, how it was supposed to go. But after a couple of weeks of driving, I discovered that I was getting really bad fuel economy. However, it was going to about double the fuel that it should have been. I guess in MPG it was probably about, 12 or something.
Okay.
And I was, so I got the workshop manual for the car and I checked the fuel pressure. I had the injectors flowed, and the only sort of two things left were really the airflow meter or the ECU that I could tell anyway.
How old were you at this time, Andy?
20.
Okay.
19, 20, something like that. So yeah, so I actually had 2 years off between finishing school and starting university. So yeah, I would have been about 20. So then I tried another known good airflow meter and it behaved the same way. So, and also the factory ECU was, the car was an N12Xer, by the way, from 1983. So the way it told you fault codes was it had an LED which used to flash in different combinations of short flashes and gaps and that sort of thing. And it was telling me that there was a throttle position sensor fault, but I could measure it with a multimeter and I found that, it was working correctly. So I thought, well, there's probably something wrong with the ECU. I don't know what. At that time I was a student, so I had lots of time and no money. And I thought, well, I could either buy another one of these from a wrecker and hope that that's still good. But, if this one's failed after 18 years or whatever, then probably another one we'll have as well. Or I could try and buy an aftermarket one, but as I said before, I had no money.
More time than money, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, well, how hard could it be to make one? So,
so hang on. Instead of buying one from a wrecker, you're saying, I could probably build that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd put
that seems reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. I'd put an oscilloscope onto the outputs. I mean, it's a fairly basic ECU. All it was doing was fuel ignition and controlling a fuel pump. There was an idle solenoid on there, but that was just an on-off thing. It wasn't impulsive modulated, so it was all really basic. And so, I thought, well, I should explain. I've been doing electronics as a hobby since I was about 10, and I've been programming computers since I was about 8. So I had a bit of an idea of what I was getting into. So my father actually used to repair Commodore 64s as a contract technician. This is, going back a long time, obviously.
Okay.
And I grew up programming the Commodore 64, so I knew the hardware of it quite intimately. So I basically made my first computer out of Commodore 64 parts.
Okay.
So
you had a background at this point already. You already had a background of
electronics and computers, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and
from a very young age.
Yeah, that's right. And I was very fortunate because my dad, even though he's not what you would call a car guy in terms of modified performance cars, he's certainly an engineer who did a lot of stuff in an environment where I could sort of see what he was doing. And when you're young, you look at what your parents are doing and you go, oh, cool, I want to do that.
For sure.
So that was very I was very lucky in that way.
No doubt. So you're sitting there and you're starting to design this computer. How did it go? Did you make an ECU that would run the car?
Yeah. So I did that. I mean, the first variant of it was fairly well. The only variant was pretty crude. I mean, I had a little 12-digit keypad and a couple of 7-segment displays, and I had a few settings in there that I could change manually. And obviously, it took a long time to do anything because I had this crude interface for it. But at the same time, I wasn't really trying to do that much either. I was just trying to get something that ran better than the factory ECU, which wasn't hard because it was running so badly.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I even took it through emissions testing just as something to do, because in Sydney, the emissions test is actually free. It's a government-run thing that they brought out because they were going to make mandatory emissions testing as part of the vehicle registration thing. They've been threatening to do that for the last, 15 years or something. They've never actually done it. But in preparation for that, they set up these free government-paid test labs so you could get your car compliant before the testing became mandatory. They've never made the testing mandatory, but the stations are still there and you can go and take your car in and get it tested. And
so you were able to pass emissions with your home-built ECU?
Yeah, but it was a 1983 model car, right? So it was before...
Sure, so that they weren't very strict.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
But I mean, this time I'd never been on a dyno. I'd never even spoken to a proper tuner. I was just doing stuff that sort of seemed sensible at the time based on, my understanding of... I forgot to mention, I did actually spend a fair bit of time logging what the factory ECU was doing. So I built a little logger thing which measured the injector duty cycle. And, I went for a fair bit of driving time with that to sort of generally work out what it was trying to do.
So basically, let me ask you this. At this point, did you have an automotive understanding, or were you just learning that as you went?
I didn't have an EFI understanding. I had... this is my second car. My first car was a carby thing. I had done an engine swap on that, but it was just to a younger version of the engine because the original one was blowing smoke. So I guess I had a bit of a general car background, which, again, most of that came from my father. But, yeah, I didn't have a performance background or an EFI background at that point.
So when did it become Adaptronic?
That was in...
So you were messing with this ECU, you were 20 years old, and how long ago was that? How old are you now?
I'm 36 now.
Okay, so 16 years ago you were building an ECU.
Yes, that's right. We sold all 64 parts, which at the time were probably 16 years old. So that was in 99, 2000. And then in 2001, my university entered a competition called Formula SAE.
Yeah, we have that over here.
Yeah, well, it started over there, yeah.
Okay.
So, that was actually I think the second year it was ever run in Australia, and our university entered in it, and we were sponsored with an aftermarket ECU. And I remember that, because of my background with my car, which, no one else in the team had, I got the job of doing the whole EFI and electronics and everything on the car. So but yeah, like I said, I'd never done any proper tuning training or spoken to a tuner, been on a dyno or anything like that. So we were sponsored with an aftermarket ECU, which is good because we couldn't have afforded to buy one. It was really quite basic. It was tuned on throttle position because, mad bike engine. And
would you say motorbike engine?
Yeah.
Okay.
So CBR 600 engine was what we used. Okay. There were lots of, when setting it up and tuning it, I found there were lots of things that I didn't like about it. And I don't want to appear ungrateful for being sponsored. But at the same time, I thought, I mean, there were lots of things I had to do which didn't quite seem sensible. Like, for example, in the Formula SAE rules, you've got to have a restrictor after the throttle body, which basically means that you have to have a plenum after that to actually get any sort of pressure recovery. It's completely different from a bike engine where you normally have 4 individual throttle bodies. So we hooked up the map sensor to the plenum and we're tuning it on TPS. And it wasn't documented anywhere, but the ECU actually corrects for map even when you're in TPS.
But on the back end, and you couldn't see it.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. It wasn't documented anywhere. And what was also a problem was that, I mean, this is all what I worked out in hindsight, right?
Okay.
But there was no filtering or very little filtering on the map signal. So the pickup point was at one end of this plenum.
Okay.
And so even though it wasn't sequentially firing the injectors, it was batch firing them. But because of the pressure changes throughout the 720-degree cycle, because it was at one end of the plenum, it delivered different fuel to different cylinders. So for quite a while, it was only running on 2 cylinders, and I was struggling to work out why. I had scopes out, and I was trying to...
And that's just because of the pressure pulsations?
Yeah, it was. We took away the map signal and just, left it going to atmosphere, and suddenly it had the same fuel on all cylinders, and we tuned it like that. One thing that I really struggled with, though, was that I think they must have done all their calculations using 8-bit maths inside the ECU, because even when you do fine adjustments of the fuel map at idle, but when you actually look at the calculated millisecond values in real time, there'd be quite a big jump. It was about, I don't know, like a half a millisecond jump or something like that between one value and the next value that it could do. So it always had a really bad rich lean hunt at idle. And yeah, there are lots of other problems as well. Like I had to build a trigger interface for it because it wouldn't deal with the factory trigger. So after the Formula SAE competition, I did a bit of a market survey and discovered that at that time, which is back in 2001, you could get Motec and Adaptronic, which are very good products, and all the others seem to lack, maybe I'm wrong, but all the others really seem to lack even what I would consider basic functionality, like closed-loop fuel control and proper idle control. So I thought, well, there must be a bit of a gap in the market here for something that's built on cost-effective hardware, but can actually run an engine properly.
Sure. So the way that you saw kind of your niche was, okay, these are really high-end ECUs that use maybe more high-end hardware than is necessary, and then you were saying I could create something that I guess is more affordable, but still has proper functionality. That's where you were trying to go.
Yeah. So I wasn't ever trying to make a product that would compete with Motec, but by looking at the sort of second and third tier products on the market, I thought that it could do something at somewhere in that price range that would actually run the engine better than a lot better than those units did.
So the irony is that those second and third rate products probably sell 5 or 10 to 1 to the top tier products like a Motec as far as volume.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I wasn't really in the industry at that point. Right. This is how I started to get into the industry. So I didn't really appreciate the size of the market or how much it was skewed toward the lower end. But even then, the skew of the market depends a lot on the particular car, I've discovered. So some cars, the customers tend to be very price sensitive, and other ones not so much. In different countries as well, it's very different. So we sell a lot of plug-and-play ECUs into, I guess, what you call first world countries, like Australia and the US. But in the sort of Southeast Asian countries, they prefer to have a cheaper wire-in ECU because the labour costs for wiring are a lot less than ours are. You see what I mean?
So they got to do a bunch more work, but work is cheap, so they'd rather do it themselves.
Yeah, and that makes our life a bit trickier because we've got to support them doing the wiring because they need more help. So
then they're calling you and basically you got to put the same amount of work, maybe even more in to support the tech side of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not that bad. And we document on our plug-in ECUs. We document all the pinouts and where they go inside the ECU, so anyone can follow that and wire in the ECU themselves and make it behave the same as the plug-in ECU. And you can use the plug-in maps on the wiring ECUs and all that sort of thing. So we try to make it as straightforward as possible. But you know yourself, you only need to get one wire wrong for the engine not to fire at all, or to only run on one, or to miss on two cylinders if you, swap two ignition wires around or something like that. Or on a rotary, if you swap around, say, the two trailing plugs, the engine will still run at idle, but it'll go pop.
So before I ask you a whole lot about current details of Adaptronic, tell me about kind of the spool-up period when you're still, are you building Adaptronic, and was it Adaptronic while you were still in school, or did that all happen afterwards? Just kind of a side habit or side hobby?
It was. Project? I did it as my thesis project. So that was in 2003. So the year after that, the thesis project was really just to show that it was possible and I could do it. So I spent probably the next year or so after that actually getting it to a point where you could use it on different sorts of cars. I started to research and learn about different crank angle sensors, which I hadn't expected that they'd be different for every single car. A bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and then actually talking to different tuners and sort of finding out what they wanted and how they did things and that sort of thing. So it was really in about 2005 that we actually had first revenue that we're actually selling to customers that were putting them on cars. Before that, we were just sort of dealing with beta testers. But yeah, I was doing this part-time while I was doing engineering consulting work.
So talk to me a little bit about the engineering consulting work. Were you doing that to the end user, or were you offering consulting services to tuning product manufacturers?
Nothing to do with cars. Engineering consulting was nothing to do with cars. It was... I started working for this company when I was in second year uni, and we designed stuff for people. So companies that either don't have their own in-house engineers, or they do but they're too busy, or they don't have time to assemble a team because they've got to get a product working and make an announcement to the public to keep their stock price nice and high, and that sort of thing. So the first sort of big project I did myself was a blood glucose meter for diabetics to monitor their blood glucose levels, obviously. But yeah, I've also worked on telecommunications products, so emergency phones for mines and for motorists in tunnels and expressways, scientific instruments, industrial controllers, what else? Yeah, medical diagnostic devices.
You've been all over the place.
Yeah, so this company was very good for exposing us, that is the engineers, to a whole bunch of different industries. And being quite a small company, it really gave me a lot more insight into how business runs as well. And I guess the softer side of it, like how you manage the customer relationship and how you manage staff and how you manage project scope creep. And which is obviously a big one in that sort of industry. You can expect that to be quite a big issue.
So you got experience and exposure to a whole bunch of different areas, from, like you said, customer service to the engineering side, the back end, the front end. And consulting's a pretty high-paying gig. So is it safe to say that, you were doing pretty well, having a good time, but maybe not enough? So, like, if you have the golden handcuffs, it's so hard to go start your own thing because, hey, man, you could wake up in the morning, go kind of have an all right day at work, make some money, and go home. Yeah. So how do you break out of that?
I mean, it's engineering.
What drives you to do that?
Well, for a start, it's engineering consulting, not management consulting, right? So, it's not like we were, BCG or, one of those big companies that, comes in and charges $100,000 to tell people, you need to lay off these 50 people.
Sure. So you're actually doing real work.
Yeah, exactly. And because of the market, it was really designing things that didn't exist yet. So the companies were either funding that out of their sales of existing products, or if they were startups, then they were only funded by venture capital money or capital from doing IPOs or share offerings or whatever. So So often, the money wasn't there to make it a really, really lucrative idea. So, the other thing is it's a bit of an efficient market as well, in that, you're sort of competing against recruitment companies that will say, oh, yeah, we'll hire you an engineer and we'll find an engineer that will do the job for you, and we'll charge, say, 20% of their first salary for a year as a finding fee. So that compared to charging out, say, $120 an hour for an engineer that they could get for, say, $40 an hour if they hired them in-house. And so we'd be consistently overcoming that objection of, yeah, but then you've got to manage them, and how do you know they're any good until they're 6 months into the project and they haven't done anything, and so on. So, it wasn't, it certainly had its problems.
Sure.
But competition from offshore was another thing that we expected to be coming up. It didn't really seem to be a big deal yet, but if it's not a big deal already, then I assume it will be soon.
So the question is, you're doing this job, and how did you enjoy it? Let me ask you that. On a scale of 1 to 10, when you woke up in the morning, how fired up were you to go to work? Yeah,
I really enjoyed the variety of doing different things and being able to, the dopamine hit of, getting something working and
Sure.
seeing it work and all that sort of thing. We're all like that, I think.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that part of it. The commercial part of it became a bit difficult, because what tends to happen a lot is that projects tend to get bigger. They don't really ever seem to get smaller. And part of that is because the customer changes their minds about what they want, which is fair enough, because, well, for a start, it's their money. And secondly, they don't necessarily know what they want at the beginning. They might see something and think, well, hang on, if we just did this differently, it'd be better.
For sure.
So,
there's always that thing that happens during the project that you start to see different options and start to, want to take advantage of those.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. And, we'd be doing the project a disservice not to do that. So the other thing is that sometimes things we just don't appreciate the technical difficulty of a project at the outset. So if it takes a lot more time, then obviously that costs a lot more money. Sometimes customers withheld information from us. So there was one project, for example, where they told us, all we need is to do, it sounds really simple. It was an infrared receiver. That's what they wanted.
Speaking of simple, let's talk about infrared receivers.
But yeah, so they and we thought, that doesn't sound too hard, and we coded it up and whatever. But yeah, partway through the project, when we were explaining to them about how the signal to noise ratio and blah 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 blah, they told us, well, actually, we've had 2 other companies try this before, and we've spent a lot of money with them, and they've both failed and haven't been able to make something that work to our specification. And had we known that at the beginning, we probably would have thought, okay, well, so obviously there's a lot more to this than what we originally thought. But all these things tend to blow out the project, and it means that you end up spending a fair bit of time trying to justify these costs to the customer. Sometimes you have to wear a bit of it, and that obviously eats into your profit. The only real way to scale the business is to hire more junior engineers that you can charge out the gross margin on, right? Because that's the only way that you can make money in that business.
Okay. So just bill more hours.
Yeah, exactly. So hire more people so you can bill more hours. And then, but that becomes less efficient as well, because sometimes if the junior engineers aren't quite as efficient, then you can't really justify charging all that time to the customer.
Right, and the more people you hire, the more managers you got to hire to manage them.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be in charge.
Exactly, and then the customer's
accountable.
Going, why am I paying for all this management? I don't want the manager. I just want the engineer.
Right.
And there were a couple of good years there before the GFC, but when the GFC happened, and basically venture
the what? What is it?
Global financial crisis.
Okay.
2008,
Clearly.
2009. It started in the US, right?
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, they
that's how we like to break things over here.
Well, yeah. So the venture capital money sort of froze up a little bit. Certainly IPOs weren't really happy.
So let me ask you something. You kind of had a kick in the ass to move in the direction that you're currently working in because of that. So you took something that, potentially could have been, oh man, my career is kind of in jeopardy. And you said, sweet, well, I've been tinkering with this anyways. Now I'm going to take it on full time. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. But also by the time I made the decision to stop doing the consulting, I was doing Adaptronic part-time. I had two full-time engineers working for me then. And so I had a lot of overheads in terms of their salaries, marketing, and so on. And because I hadn't been on it full-time, I hadn't really put the focus into drive the sales. I'd hired a sales guy, but he basically didn't really do anything. And I thought, well, look, I do actually have to go full-time into it if it's actually ever going to get anywhere and not just be a drain on the money I'm making from consulting.
So how do you justify hiring two full-time engineers and having them work there? Is it because you're thinking, okay, pretty soon this is going to start to work?
Yeah,
I mean, had you even thought about it as far as, making it a viable business, like really taking off?
Yeah.
How do you justify?
Yeah, I mean, I had to. Certainly we were growing sales. It just wasn't enough to cover their costs at that time.
Sure.
I had a bit of an idea of a product that we could do, which I thought would actually fill a need that our products at the time could not. And so I basically took a bit of a gamble there to hire another engineer to help with the development of that, in the expectation that sales would pick up very quickly. After that, I really needed people full-time to do the engineering work, but also the production and dispatch and that sort of thing, because it was very hard to do that while I was had a middle management position in this consulting company.
Tell us something right now, Andy, that's got you like really fired up. Like, what are you doing right now that's got you pumped?
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm sort of spending a bit too much time at the moment doing the production and manufacturing and that sort of thing. So I'm delegating that, which is going to make my life a lot more enjoyable. But the other thing that I'm starting to look at now is characterizing third-party products that our ECUs talk to. By that, I mean that we've had volumetric efficiency tuning since 2009 or so. And at the time when I first implemented that, I thought, oh yeah, people know their injector flow rates and, they should have a decent idea about the dead times or offsets, depending on whose language you're talking.
Sure.
So they'll just need to enter that and everything will be sweet. And then I discovered that no one has any idea about those things. However, some customers have reported that, their fuel maps look a bit funny, as in not what you would expect a VE map to look like. And so what I'm doing at the moment is replicating RD's data to see if there's a difference between, say, how they drive them on their test system, which uses Motec ECU, and how we drive them, if there's some difference there, because if you've got different flyback clamp voltages, that's going to change the offset and that sort of thing. And also to see the effects of other different components that people need, like fuel pressure regulators. I've discovered that fuel pressure regulators there's quite a lot of difference between them. And in the static actual pressure that you get with a constant flow, but also in their response to pulsations as well. People only ever put these liquid filled pressure gauges on them, so you don't actually see the pulsations with them at all, but I've measured up to about a 30% difference in fuel delivery by pulse and injector for the same on time but different off times because of different pulsations you get with resonances in the fuel system. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can about that so that we can advise people so that their maps can look nice and flat, and when people ask us, we're in a better position to advise them. So
right.
That's what I'm excited about at the moment.
Right on. So
Sounds
tell
like
me more about.
Thing to be excited about, though.
No, we're going to go full geek on this episode for sure. It's cool.
It's the only way I know. Sorry.
So is the standard like mechanical diaphragm type fuel pressure regulator? Is that what's going to be in the future?
I don't have any plans to make those.
Is there anything that you could see that like, are you talking about that design could use improvement, or?
No, I'm saying that out of the different aftermarket ones, there's quite a big variation between their performance.
Gotcha.
And I've measured about 6 of them, and 1 factory pressure reg as well. And the slope, that is the if you graph the fuel pressure against the rate of fuel flowing through the bypass. On the very best one I've found is the TurboSmart FPR 2000. And other aftermarket ones that people claim as an equivalent, or I think some people even look at pressure regulators as a bit of a commodity item. Oh yeah, you put a pressure regulator. Yeah, well,
I don't know any better, so until somebody tells me otherwise.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate it, and at first I was when I was first building my injector test machine thing, I had a little TurboSmart an FPR 800 on it, I think, with the NPT 1/8 NPT fittings, and then when I was talking to a guy and I was buying a whole bunch of dash fittings and all that sort of thing, he said, well, that regulator is not going to flow enough for what you need, and he sold me this other one who I won't name at the moment.
Nice.
But he said, yeah, see, that one's got dash 8 fittings on it, it'll flow enough for you, this little one won't do the job. I thought, okay, fair enough. Again, I didn't know any better. And when I actually started measuring, I'd turn injectors on, start pulsing them, I noticed the fuel pressure would drop on the gauge. And I thought, hang on a second, that's dropping by more than I would expect it to drop by. So when someone's just, plumbs together a fuel system based on components that they get recommended, how stable actually is their fuel pressure? And could that be a reason why some people's fuel maps start looking funny? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I sort of felt a bit like if you ever open a kitchen drawer and you see one cockroach in there and you think, oh, okay, I know there's a bunch of them somewhere. I don't know if I want to go looking though. So I bought a few different pressure eggs, and I borrowed a few from people as well. And I hooked them all up with a flow sensor and a pressure sensor, and just ran a fuel pump at different speeds and graphed the fuel pressure against the flow. And some of them, like the TurboSmart FPR 2000, is very flat. I mean, they've all got some sort of slope. But this other one that I was sold had a slope that was about 3 times that of the TurboSmart one. So in other words, the pressure changed 3 times as much with the same flow change. But having said that, this factory one that I checked as well, which was off an FDRX7, was about 4 times the TurboSmart one. But the factory one's only designed to work over a narrow range because you're not making 600 horsepower on with a factory fuel system. The difference in flow that you need between idle and full power on a factory system is not that much if it's only making 130 kilowatts at the wheels, compared to if you're trying to make 500 kilowatts at the wheels. Now that I know how much fuel pressure varies with a few of the different popular regulators, I know I'll be able to tell people, guys, use the TurboSmart FPR 2000 reg if they haven't already bought one. And if they have already bought one, then I'll have a bit of an idea of how much it's going to vary by and how much that could affect the map. And so if they say, my map looks funny, I'll have an idea of how much funny should be due to the regulator, if that makes sense.
So where can we find out the technical details of your fuel pressure regulator test? Are you going to put that out for public consumption?
Yeah, I mean, I've put it up on Facebook. I'll write a proper blog article, and I'll put that on the website under adaptronic.com.au/articles. Yeah,
nice.
I haven't put it up. Yeah, I haven't put it up yet, but I'll do that.
So, Andy, I want to switch gears from tech to business.
Okay.
And I want to talk about a failure moment. I want to talk about the worst experience that you've had in business. Take us there.
Okay. Well, I think probably the worst was after, well, people will probably be able to guess based on my story from before, which is that after I did go full-time into Adaptronic and I didn't have the consulting income, and I knew I was losing money at that point. So I did a lot of work to drive sales, and we had about a 50% increase in that year, which was good, but it wasn't really enough. And I'd also spent a lot of money on marketing things which I was sure were going to work, but most of them did almost nothing.
Talk about that. What did you spend money on as far as marketing that didn't work?
Oh, heaps of things. Sponsoring cars, advertising in magazines, going to car events like Power Cruise and things like that. Yeah, just
all the traditional forms.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the best way is what? What have you found is the best way now? Looking back, hindsight's 20/20, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the best way is that works for my business anyway, is to find shops that specialise in particular cars and give a solution to them that works really well with that particular sort of car. And that way, because those shops already have good market penetration within that market, and you don't need to re-educate that customer, because with other shops which do whatever walks in the door, they never have enough time to learn about each new car that comes in. So, with those kind of shops, we're always teaching them about, the different trigger setups and wiring on, one day it's a Toyota engine, the next day it's a Ford engine, and next it's a Nissan, and so on. The best way I've found is to find the shops that specialise in individual types of cars, and get them on board, because that way you get the repeat business from them. They'll push the product to their network as well. That's what I found works.
That sounds good. I buy that 110%. Really, basically partnering up with somebody who really is already in and involved with a certain group of people.
Yeah.
And supporting those people fully. So that's killer. So we got a little off track, but go back to the worst experience.
Okay. Yeah. So so after I went full time and spent all this money on things that didn't work, and and I hired a business coach in there as well. I was trying to give it a good shake. Yeah. So basically, eventually, I got to the point where I just ran out of money. Previously to that, I had been in a job where the owner had, we were losing money, and basically people went without being paid for about 3 months or something like that. And I remember being so angry about that at the time and thinking, if I ever have employees, I'm never going to do that to them. So basically, when I got to that point, I had to tell them and let them go and say, look, I'm sorry, guys, but I was expecting that this and this and this would make a big difference. They haven't. So I'm not going to expect you guys to work for free in case it does turn around sometime soon, because I've been expecting it to turn around sometime soon. So
this is your burden. You didn't want it to be their burden.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very hard. It's probably one of the probably one of the most emotional things I've done in business anyway. But it was the right decision, and the other guys both got jobs, and I keep in contact with them, and one of them actually works for one of our dealers now, who is a specialist in a particular sort of car. So that's worked out well. So that was probably the worst. Coming to that conclusion, probably I think once I'd come to that conclusion, it was probably all right after that in actually executing it, but actually coming to that conclusion was really hard.
Yeah, business decisions are not always the easy decision, for sure.
Yeah. And
you got to be able to make that decision no matter what.
Pretty much every successful business owner I know has gone through that at least once. I know yeah, I don't want to name names because, you know, they've told that to me in confidence, but yeah, including in our industry. So
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, but I mean, if it were easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah, that's the difference for sure.
Probably, I mean, the markets sort of tend towards becoming more efficient over time, I think. But until it gets there, I think that the only way to differentiate, one of my mentors taught me this, the only real way to differentiate is by doing what other people are not really prepared to do. And, you know, sometimes he teaches things to people and you know, they complain that it's too hard, and he say, well, yeah, you should be happy that it's hard because it's a barrier for others that couldn't be bothered doing it.
That's been a mind shift for me over the last maybe year. You know, a barrier to entry is not a bad thing. So why do you think you've been successful when other people haven't been?
Probably the biggest thing is the partnerships I form with other people. So our US dealer, for example, Wyatt from TurboSource, he's very active in getting shops on board and supporting them and that sort of thing. So without his help, we certainly wouldn't have the sales in the US that we do. Having said that, we've got to have the back end to support it as well. So, you know, I've got 3 full-time tech support guys. And obviously we've got to have the products to sell. But yeah, I do talk to a lot of people and I spend a lot of time listening. People in our industry, business owners in other industries. I'm part of this business networking group thing where they do conferences every quarter and get speakers in who are experts in particular topics. You know, not so much recently, but, you know, until maybe about 8 months ago, I spent a lot of time reading different business books as well. After a while, they sort of tend to sound the same. You go, okay, I think I understand this now. So yeah, I think it's probably being open to learn new things and trying new things. The other thing that I guess has made a big difference for me over the last probably 2 years or something like that, is actually being really clear on your own values and what's important to you. Because if you just always do what's pragmatic or what other people expect you to do, if it doesn't sit right with you, then, you know, you end up feeling really dirty about it and it affects your motivation and that sort of thing.
Talk about that a little bit. Specifically, feeling really dirty about what and affecting your motivation. Like, tell me about what you're talking about.
I used to work in an electronics shop. So between going to school and university, I worked in an electronics shop, and there were certain products which I knew were not very good. So they'd either have a high failure rate or they just didn't really do very well what they claimed to do in the box and that sort of thing. Yeah, and so, you know, we'd sell something because it's because we have to. It's our job, even though I know it's going to come back the next day. Yeah, that really affected my motivation. I felt really sort of, I don't know, unclean. I don't know really how you can say it. You know, it's just like I just felt like I didn't have the words to explain it at the time because I was only 18. But yeah, I really felt like I'd violated my own ethics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just getting it done to get paid and not putting your heart and soul into it.
Yeah, and sometimes you see shops bullshitting customers and saying things like, well, you know, this part on the car was faulty or not right or whatever, so we had to put this other one on, and there was nothing actually wrong with it. It's just that you know, their mechanic, you know, stuffed up something, or they misdiagnosed it in the first place, so they replaced a part that they didn't actually need to be replaced because that wasn't the problem. And I think, well, okay, these people either, for them, honesty is just not part of their value set, or they've got some other way of justifying it to themselves, like, well, I know that wasn't the problem on the car, but I've got to charge the customer because, you know, we had to do that as part of the discovery process. You know, to find out what the actual problem was on the car, we had to eliminate that. We had to buy it to be able to eliminate it. So, you know, I'm not going to pay for that out of my pocket. You know, the customer's going to pay for that. And I'm going to tell the customer it was not right because I don't want to have the argument with them. Or however they justify it to themselves, I don't know. But I guess I'm just saying that you need to actually be clear about what your values are, so that you can actually make decisions consistently with them. And if you've got staff, then you need to make sure that their values align with your values, so that they can make decisions on your behalf. Otherwise, you've just got to micromanage them at every point, because you won't trust them to make decisions, and then they'll get pissed off because they don't have any autonomy, and you'll be pissed off because you can't leave them to do anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, you really hit home on that one. I think that's huge. Everybody's trying to I don't know, justify something to themselves at some point, don't you think? How do you strike that balance between always following your value system to a T and surviving financially in the short term?
Yeah, I think. And sometimes it can be. Sometimes it can be hard, and I guess I'm fortunate, or due to hard work, whatever you want to call it, that I'm in a position where, we can do that. But I appreciate that. So you're not willing to put anything out there that's not 100%. Well, it's you never know what's 100% until it actually.
But 100% to you. But 100% to you, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like you're not willing to put in. Right.
But also, like if we tell a customer that something's we just had an example. When was it? A couple of months ago now. A customer was running a VW engine, of all things, an old Beetle engine in a sandrail or something, using one of our ECUs, and they want to run direct fire. They already had a set of dumb coils, so need an external igniter for them, and they found this 4-channel igniter from another company, which I won't name, and they said, will this work? Now, on paper, it looks like it'll work. It just takes a normal logic input that's the right polarity, and it and it's got 4 IGBTs in it. So yeah, why shouldn't it work? So we said that should be fine. And the customer pulled his hair out, or he and the shop that he was dealing with, because the shop contacted us about it. They pulled their hair out for quite a while trying to work out why. They've got fuel, but it doesn't run properly. It misfires plugs, and it's the same when you run it on Start You Bastard or Aero Start or Carby Cleaner or whatever. So,
Start You Bastard.
Yeah, so that's what it's called over here. I'm an Aussie.
That's awesome.
And
I'm gonna steal that, by the way.
Yeah, it's made by Newlon, I think. So it's obviously an ignition problem if it, if you can turn off the fuel and it doesn't run properly on starter fluid. We checked through the logs. It looked like all the triggering was fine. The RPM was solid. It wasn't jumping around. Obviously it was not right because the engine wasn't right, but I believe that it was matching what the engine was doing. They tried it with timing lights and looked like the timing was right when it worked. So I said, well, look, the only thing I can think of is the igniter. So, I sent him 4 of our single channel igniters, and he wired them up, and it was fine after that. And he said, how much for these igniters? And I said, look, don't worry about it, because we said this one would work based on what we could see, and we're wrong. So yeah.
Well, your value system and method of doing business is the exception and not the rule. I'm pretty impressed.
Well, thank you, but I guess part of it is because I'm in a position where we can just send out a bunch of igniters. It'd be. And I guess we sort of change our just based on what we
available to you.
Yeah.
If it was just you in your garage, you wouldn't be in a position to do that.
Well, if we didn't have stock of a lot of stock of igniters that or if we had to buy it in that was going to be real expensive, maybe some people would say, well, look, Andy, you really should be paying him for all the time that he spent on it as well.
Jeez.
And
listen to you.
To that I'd say, well, Yeah, maybe in theory, but, for a start, I've got to draw the line somewhere. Secondly, what if he'd spent, a year trying to solve it and hadn't, and still couldn't diagnose it after that,
Right. At some point, he's got responsibility for being able to diagnose something in a reasonable amount of time, too.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think he took an unreasonable amount of time to do it. It was pretty obscure. Like, I didn't think I thought the ignition system would have been fine, but it's just we eliminated all the more likely things,
Yeah.
So
process of elimination?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't, I don't think I can please everyone all the time, and I don't intend to please everyone all the time. But I have to make decisions that are consistent with my values so that I can defend them with conviction.
The thing is, you can't fake values, and you can't fake a culture within your organization.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, when you talk about values and you talk about really living up to them, like, you couldn't say to your employees, hey, guys, this is what we're about. Let's go make a mission statement, and then, not live it day to day. Because then you got to, if somebody kind of breaks the rules or operates outside of the value system, then, what do? You look like a hypocrite if you're not, like, living it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it means
so
that
you can't fake that shit.
Yeah. Well, also it means that when someone has a question about what should we do in this situation, you always answer it with respect to the values.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
And they can answer it on their own without having to go to you.
Yeah. And if you need to tell someone off, again, bring it back to the values and of what value, how did they violate one of our values here? Do you know what I mean?
Talk about your values. You guys have a written mission statement? Did you guys all get together and create it? Like, I think about that. I think about that all the time. Like, we should do that.
Yeah.
Get everybody together and just really, create an environment where we can brainstorm and get everybody on the same page,
I think
rowing in the same direction.
I think with the mission statement, it's a bit it takes a bit of time to articulate it and to work out what you're actually about and what really drives you. So I haven't really formalized a mission statement yet. It's basically we want to help people take control over their passion. So to give people control basically is what we're about. I haven't thought of a good way to sort of word that. But yeah, certainly with the values, I did that with the team and we had a couple of people then, and one person has left because, the real reason is that they weren't consistent with her values. She would say, I guess it was performance reasons as well, but the performance reasons were because of the value reasons.
Right, I agree with that 100. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then in subsequent people that we've hired, we in the job ad we put a link to it and said, this is what we believe. This is what we're about. I'd like you to address these in an email to us. What you think about these and how you interpret them, what they mean to you. And so that way they don't have any surprises. And if it's not right to them, then they obviously know they're not going to last very long.
So are you the tech guy and the manager?
Yes. I'm trying to obviously delegate things as I find ways to delegate them. To be able to delegate things, you need to develop systems and train people and all that sort of thing.
Are you physically building the ECUs that you're putting out right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a screwdriver and assembling the boxes. And that's obviously not a very good use of my time. If you're running a services business as like a workshop, and you're trying
what business?
A services business.
Okay, yeah.
Like a workshop, and you're trying to develop products as well. The workshop work makes you money straight away. The product business doesn't make you money straight away because you've got to invest all the time to the R&D. So for me, putting together ECUs makes money right now because we need them to sell to fulfill orders. But training other people to do it and building tools for them to do it more easily is an investment that doesn't pay off immediately. So there's always got to be a bit of a trade-off there between the two, unless you're either very, very heavily capitalized or, I don't know, a genius.
My company is in the exact same boat. We deal with day-to-day in and out work because that pays today's bills right now. But product development has been significantly more profitable. And the amount of time that you spend to tune one car or to build one car, for example, then you're done and you have one car done and you collect the thousands of dollars or whatever to build that car.
Yeah.
And you're done. If you spend the same amount of time to develop a product, you spend that same amount of time that you would spend tuning the car, and then that product sells on its own and exists for years to come. So instead of 12 hours or 20 hours, say 80 hours to do product development and create a product, or 80 hours to do one car. At the end of the 80 hours, you have one car done, or at the end of the 80 hours, you have a product developed, and then that product exists for the next, the rest of your life, or as long as it's relevant.
Yeah.
So just as far as time in versus, reward, it's kind of you got to strike the balance between, I guess, today's cash and next year's cash.
Yeah, exactly.
Business is less interesting to you than the technical side?
It's not that it's less interesting. I'm certainly stronger on the technical side than on the business side. But yeah, it's not that it's less. If I weren't interested in it, then I wouldn't take my time to educate myself about it.
Sure.
Yeah, which I do. So I certainly do find the business side interesting. It's just that at the moment I can't. I need to do both of them because I don't need to do all the technical stuff because I've delegated some of that. But it's certainly a lot easier to delegate the technical stuff than the business stuff. So that's what I'm working on.
Tell us about a game-changing product that you've seen in the last year.
I've been really interested by the Motec M1 and the AEM Infinity ECUs.
So I'm impressed and surprised to hear those two ECUs standing side by side. And I'd like to go into that at some point, but that's not going to happen right now.
Fair enough.
What software program are you using on a daily basis?
Probably the biggest one we use is Zendesk. So it's a ticket-based customer support thing, which can take requests from email, web forms, Facebook page posts, Facebook page messages, and all goes into one sort of channel, and you can have multiple agents, they're called, answer questions. And so that's very useful. That also interfaces with our CRM system. So we get people's contact details automatically from that.
What do you use for CRM? And for those that don't know, tell them what CRM is.
Okay, CRM is a customer relationship manager. So it's a software that it's a database of all your customers and their details and all that sort of thing. Some of them are quite sophisticated, and then you can send emails to, say, people who have an ECU already, or people who have an ECU and their car's turbocharged. If you want to say, hey, you guys can set up this by gear. We don't have all that level of sophistication. We're using Capsule CRM because that does interface directly with Zendesk, and it also gives you the ability to enter in unlimited custom fields. So if we want to put in, so when we have in our CRM, for example, which engine they have and which car it's in and which ECU they have and whether they're an existing customer or a prospect, that sort of thing.
So you just dropped Capsule CRM, Zendesk, and what do you use for project management?
Teamwork PM, or it might be called Teamwork now. Yeah, which was made by some of the guys that left Basecamp because they thought it wasn't really being updated enough.
Okay. So there's 3 software resources for everybody. We talked about software. What about a favorite app? You on your phone often?
The only mobile app that I really use is Dropbox, actually.
Dropbox is awesome.
Yeah.
I love Dropbox.
I'm a fan.
And what about your favorite shop tool? This could be fancy, like a picoscope or even something as simple as a power probe.
Yeah, well, I used to use the normal scope, but then I got the picoscope so I could monitor more channels and carry it more easily while traveling, and now picoscope is my favorite tool.
Isn't that thing badass?
I love it. I'm a fan.
That thing's awesome. So what's the future of automotive performance?
I think, well, certainly everything's going to go DI. I think probably high-performance diesel engines are going to become more common for people to modify as well.
Over here, it's just big trucks. Over there, is there a market growing in the diesel performance car community?
Yeah, little Volkswagen things have made it a bit more popular. I don't know how many of them are actually being modified. From what I can tell, modifications either reflashing or putting an interceptor thing on them that I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it ends up putting more fuel in, which on a diesel, that's what you do.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah, no smoke, no poke. I haven't really played at all with diesels myself, so I can't really comment too much about that. But I think that they'll be becoming more popular. I mean, even Hyundai are doing turbocharged diesels in their cars now, so it's going to become a more popular platform.
Nice.
I think.
So, what's the future for you and your company?
Well, at the moment, we've got a bunch of R&D that we've sort of already committed to getting through, so we'll be doing that. And then after that, probably the biggest thing is that we'll be doing characterizing third-party products that need to play with our products so that basically life can be easier for people, their base maps can be more accurate and that sort of thing. And then we'll probably be looking to do more plug-and-play ECUs for the newer cars. By newer cars, I mean ones that we don't currently support. So things like 350Z and 370Zs and things like that. Okay. I think.
Well, Andy, I really want to say thank you so much for being here, talking to me about all the different things. Super technical guy, and this is probably the geekiest show that we've had so far, and I'm stoked.
Thank you.
So, how do we connect with you guys over at Adaptronic?
Yeah, probably the best way is through the website, adaptronic.com.au. It's got an Ask Us thing on every page, which you can click, or otherwise the Facebook page, facebook.com/Adaptronic.
Well, thanks again, Andy, all the way from Australia. Appreciate it.
No worries, mate.
Have a good one. No problem. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, cheers, mate. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app, tap the subscribe button,